everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you so much, everyone, for being today with me. It is a new session of the Bisagi's Process Professor. My name is Kevin Guerrero. I am the Technical Marketing Manager here at Bizagi, and I am also really well known by being the Bisagi's Process Professor. So thank you so much for joining us in another Thursday for a new session of the Bisagi's Process Professor. Today, we have a really interesting session where I will be talking about some tips, some best practices, and actually showing you some features that we got within our product that will allow you to actually increase your efficiency. And one of the ways on how we will be able to do this is to actually enabling the reusability in your Bizagi projects, right? So my main objective today is that you learn how you will be able to reuse a lot of things that you do in your project in different business situations, right? So one of the things that we work so hard in Bizagi is to improve every single day the way on how our customers can actually deliver a rapid value, right? So that they don't go for projects of, 3, 4 years doing projects and never delivering something. We want that delivery is much quicker and fast. So that's why we will see how you can actually increase that efficiency if you reuse more elements in your projects, okay? So if this is the first time that maybe you're coming into one of the Bisagi's Process Professor session, first of all, let me thank you. And second one, let me explain you a little bit about this program, right? So Bisagi's Process Professor is a program that we launched on January 2021. It means almost 2 years ago, it was the first session that we did of Bisagi's Process Professor. And our main objective at that moment was to create a common space and free space for our community. It means for our customers, for our partners, for our employees, and in general for anyone that is interested to learn a little bit more about Bizagi and the tendencies that we're seeing in the market. So the way on how it works is that we have every single month one session. We always have a schedule the second Thursday of the month. So that's why you are seeing in this moment, this is going to be November 10th. It's the session where we're going. So every single second Thursday of the month, we have a new session. So in that way, you know that by the same channel at the same time, you can connect and you will find one session for you, right? And in general, every single Bisagi's Process Professor session has a structure like this. And I say almost always because there are going to be some sessions that doesn't apply for this schema, as for example, the one that I'm going to do today. But in general, what I try to do always is to have this. So always have a topic overview initially, that it will be where I will be talking about a specific topic, right? Maybe some trends that we have identified in the market, maybe a new feature in the product, maybe a new version, or maybe something that would allow you to improve what you do on a daily basis in your organization, right? Then I will always try to show you how everything that I am saying to you or everything that I saw, say from a theoretical point of view, it's now able or we are able to do it and to deliver using our product. So that's why we always have like demonstrations of our products. And at the end, we're going to always have an open space for Q&A, right? One of the great things about this Q&A space is that you don't have to do questions just about the topic that we cover on that session. It means that if for any reason you are in a project, you are in the middle of an implementation, you want to move one process from testing to production and you have an issue or you have a question or you want to know something, you can put that will be a space for you to actually ask any question that you have. So I'm going to always have a couple minutes at the end of our sessions to complete and to do our Q&A, okay? So not saying anymore, let's jump directly with what we have today. So enjoy, relax, and let's go for this Process Professor session, right? So today I will be talking about basically about how to increase the efficiency, enabling the reusability in your projects. And today the schema or the structure of the session will be a little different, right? Because I am going to focus mainly in the rapid value delivery message that we have in our organization. Is one of the main objectives and strategies that we have defined in Bizagi from the beginning of this year is how we can actually make our customers to act to deliver value really quickly, right? That's one of the first things. And then as part of that rapid value delivery, we have within our Bizagi Studio the 7 steps that you can follow to create an application. So the way on how I am going to do this session today is that I'm going to go through the different steps that we have to each of those steps, right? And in each of those steps, I will talk a little bit some best practices or some little tips and tricks that will allow you to reuse elements, right? When you are implementing or when you are creating your applications, okay? So that is going to be a little different from the schema that I just mentioned before, but again, if we're going to combine a theoretical part with a practical part that we have here. So let's start with this rapid value delivery pillar that we have defined in our company, right? So mainly we have identified and we have defined in Bizagi that one of our main goals is to actually be able and next to our customers to do rapid value delivery. We're completely sure that we cannot go to those, or we cannot be one of those platforms or one of those technologies where you start a project and you will see the results maybe after 3 years or 4 years, or maybe you will never see the results. No, we're sure that once that you start a project with us, we want to actually deliver quickly with good quality, improving a lot of things in your organization, but in an agile way. So that's why we have defined our 4 Ds in the implementation projects that we have in Bizagi: the discover, the define, the develop, and the deliver. That is our main objective. And every single thing that we're doing in Bizagi, it's mapped with one of these Ds, right? So if I am going to, or if Bizagi is going to develop something new for simulations, so that can be completely mapped to the discover part, so that's go there. If I'm improving my features in Bizagi Studio, that's my develop. So we have, as an organization, a clear objective of how the future of the organization must be mapped with this rapid value delivery strategy that we have, right? As part of the rapid value delivery, we have the develop that belongs completely to our tool that is Bizagi Studio. And in that Bizagi Studio tool, we have one tool or one system, right, at the end, that allows our users to build applications in a really quickly and agile way. This Bizagi Studio adapts automatically according to the technical levels of the users that are working on the application. It means that we have that flexibility in our tool. We can define if this is an expert user, so we give access to everything, or if this is maybe a middle one, so we just give access to some of the features and not all of them, or if this is maybe a basic one that doesn't have technical skills, and because of that, we're going to just give access maybe to the basic options that we have there. So today, our session is going to be focused on this wizard. This is one of the views that we got in Bizagi, and is the one that allows us to create applications in 7 steps. If you have never used the wizard view and this is the first time that you are seeing this, let me just go really quickly to the 7 steps. So the step number 1 is going to be where we create our process diagrams. It means it's a place where we transform business situations into process diagrams using the notation BPM, right? The second step is everything where we have the creation of the data model. So if I have a business situation that I want to automate, I need to define how to store the data. This is nothing different than create maybe some tables. The step number 3, it is going to be where I'm going to define the forms, the screens, the UI, how our end users are going to interact with our application, what information I'm going to display to them, what fields are going to be mandatory. So all of that is defined on the step number 3. The step number 4 is the one that belongs to the logic, how we create the logic for the process. So this is where we do the validations, where we pre-populate data, where we check that the end user is completing all the fields that are mandatory. Everything in terms of the business rules happen in the step number 4. Step number 5, it's performers. We define who has to do what, right? So this activity must be executed by someone from HR located in London. So that's what we do in step number 5. And the step number 6 is where we do all the integrations. So for my process to work as expected, it is required that we complete integration with external systems. Like what? Like my CRM, like my cloud storage space, like my whatever is needed, we will leave it there, right? And the step number 7, that is the last one, is where we just execute everything that we have, right? So every single of these steps has a main objective, as you just see it. And in every single of these steps, except for this last one, the execution, that is where we just run everything that we have taught, has some tips, some best practices, and some options that you can use to actually increase the reusability in your projects. And that's what we're going to start seeing here. So my main objective today is that you see how important it's going to be in your projects to always be thinking in how to reduce and how to reuse. Reduce the amount of time that I am going to spend creating my projects or creating these applications, and how I can reuse components or elements that I have created before, right? Or that maybe I just want to create one time and no more. So my message is always keep in mind every single time that you are going to create something in your Bizagi projects, always ask yourself, is this something that I can reuse later? Or is it something that I can already use because someone already created for me, and in that way I am reducing my work? This is something that must be answered every single time before we start creating something in Bizagi. Because if we think in that way, then the way on how we build our applications will be much better, much more efficient, and even more flexible in terms of the kind of things that we can create in our projects. So to understand everything in terms of the reusability in the different components of our projects, is really important to understand how the project structure looks like in Bizagi. I'm not going to go into any technical details because I don't want that you get bored, but I just want that you understand that in general what a project looks like. So this is the general structure. So every time that we're working in a Bizagi project like this one, this is my high level. The project is the highest level that we can have in terms of hierarchy, right? Inside of a Bizagi project, we are going to have almost multiple applications. How many? As many applications as we want. And in every single application, we're going to have different processes. How many? As many as we want. But every single process needs entities that, again, entities are the tables where we store the information. So for every single project to work, it is necessary to have different entities. So let's talk about this in a more, let's say, business situation, right? So we can just have a general project, a global project, and I can have two applications in this project. One, that it will be the commercial application, and the second one, that it can be my internal services. Those two applications are inside or within or are part of this global project, right? And now, for that commercial application to work, we have a purchase request process and a billing process. And for the internal application to work, we have the vacation request and we have the certificate request process. And for all these processes to work as expected, we're going to have multiple entities, right? Why this is so important? Because when we start talking about reusability in Bizagi projects, we need to understand this hierarchy because it will depend a lot where we want to reuse the elements. We will be seeing through this session that are sometimes I will be able to reuse something just within one process. So I can create something for the purchase request process that can be used just in the purchase request process. But I can also create something that can be reused in the commercial application. It means that every single process that I have within that application can reuse it. Or I can create elements that can be reused at the project level, meaning that any entity or any application can reuse that object. So understanding this structure will help us a lot to understand how to reuse different elements in the different steps. So let's start in the 7 steps to create an application, right? And the first step that we got when we're creating our application is the creation of our process diagram, right? Remember that this is the plane that at the end, what we're doing is that we're transforming or we're, let's say, translating a daily business application situation into a process diagram. That is mainly what we do. So in terms of the reusability, what can I do? What are the options that Bizagi offers to me at this stage? We're going to talk about specifically about two. The first one, it is one element that is an object from the notation. Remember that all diagrams created in Bizagi follows the BPMN, Business Process Model and Notation. It's an standard, it's well known by all the industry, and that's basically what we use in the company. So to create process diagrams, there is one element that are the ones called reusable sub-processes. And one of the great advantages of these reusable sub-processes is that, again, instead of maybe replicate the business logic multiple times, what we're able to do with these reusable processes is to put all the information or part of the logic that we have in a process in this component, and then reusable multiple times in different business scenarios. It's common, or we are seeing commonly that, for example, there are a lot of approval cycles, right? So I create a request, and that request must be approved by my supervisor, and then by the manager, and then the director. If that's something that is it's easy that we have it in different business situations, it means it repeats a lot in different business contexts. Then we can go directly and create a reusable sub-process and define that just one time and then use it as many times as we want in different business situations. So all of that is what you are going to have, the elements or the information that you are going to have it here. So that's the first option or the first things that we're going to have here for the first step. The second one is something that I already talked or I already mentioned in one of our previous versions, right? Or in our previous session in the process processor, and it is the pre-made components and examples. So in the first step, Bizagi offers something that is the Bizagi Exchange, and specifically what it is called the process accelerators. So these are going to be full business situations, completely automated. It means it's not just the process diagram, it's actually the whole business situation, are the forms, are the business rules, are the performance, everything is done there. And from there, you are actually able to just reuse it. So now, how this is going to look like if we saw it directly in our projects, right? In our application. And this is when I told you that maybe this session will be a little different because I'm going to start switching constantly from the from my presentation to the tool, to Bizagi, so you can see exactly what's happening there. So when I am creating, right, my process diagrams, I am in the first step. I always go to the addition of that process diagram. And what Bizagi is going to do for me is that it's going to just open directly the diagram that I have created, and I can start creating any element that I want. So the first option that I just talked to you, it's everything about the reusable sub-processes. So once again, here in my process diagram, the reusable sub-processes will be available on the left side in the panel. And what you will be able to do is just drag and drop that element and then complete the configuration for that sub-process. So do you want this one to be embedded or reusable? In this case, it will be reusable, which is the process that you want, and then you just define this. What is going to be one of the great advantages about these reusable sub-processes? That again, once that you already have it here, once that you define it as a reusable sub-process, then you can use it in different business situations. And not only that, also when we go now to the expert view, we will be able always to find those reusable subprocesses under the processes section and specifically under the reusable one. So here, I'm going to see the process that I create and I will be able to reuse it in multiple context situations. So it's thinking in, is this something that it's 100% specifically for this business situation where I'm working, or this is something that can replicable? Is this something that I can I will be using this one in other situations? When I got that, then it will be the answer for you. And the second element that I told you here in this step number 1 is everything about the process accelerators, right? So on these process accelerators, where we're going to have is, in the step number 1, take a look that you got the process exchange. Once that you open this process exchange, we will be able to see all the processes that are fully automated, ready for you to use, and that you can just use it at any time. So it means that at this level or at this moment, if you don't want to start from scratch, and maybe you want to see an example, maybe you want to see how someone internally here in Bizagi has built a process, you can go and use it. So first step, reusable subprocess always, and also something that will allow you or will help you a lot to reduce the time that you work, it's going to be the corresponding process accelerators. Now, let's move to the step number 2. So when we talk about the step number 2, we're talking about where it's the place or when it's that we're going to create our data models. As I was telling you, this is step number 2, is where actually we have the opportunity to define how the data is going to be stored, right? So which are going to be my tables, and from those tables, how I am going to basically store my information. So when we're talking about this, we're talking about how to store the data, there is one option that allows you, right, to reduce and reuse, right? Again, and it is something that is a feature called inheritance. What is going to be the main objective behind of this? We have identified that when we're creating our data model, it can happen a lot, and it actually happens a lot, that we can have, let's say, different hierarchies within the tables. So I can say, hey, I am going to have a client, but that client in my organization sometimes is an individual and sometimes it is a corporation, right? And then when we start thinking about how to best design this data model, we say like, okay, you know what? It's easy. Let's create just one entity for the corporation and then one entity for the individual. Pretty easy. But then we start seeing, I don't know, things that maybe will be not as good as we want, because then it will be what happened if in the context that we're working, we want, for any reason, to maybe go directly and search for all the clients. So it will be not as easy as we were thinking, because now we have to separate tables, right? So when we have faced these kind of situations, right, we have a feature in the creation of our data models that it is called inheritance. What is going to be the idea between this? That we can create different hierarchical levels, and then some of those entities will be parent entities, another will be children entities. What is the great advantage of this? That our data model will be much simple to modify, it will be much flexible, it is easy to create, and actually, if we got different requests or new requests in the future, it will be much easier for us to adapt this data model to those new situations, right? So how all of this works? So at the end, what we need to think about is which is the common information that all my children entities will need. In this quite simple example is, I have a client, and for all my clients, independently if they are individuals or if they are corporations, I need always a phone number, an email, an address, and if that customer is a VIP or not. That's common information that I need for all of them. That's it. So I create this entity and I define these attributes. And now I'm going to be able to create other two separate entities. These are going to contain unique information that applies just for those entities. In this case, an individual, I will require a picture, a full name, and a driver license. And a corporation, I will need a contact name, company name, and an industry. And what I am going to do is that I am going to say that these two entities basically has an inherit from the client entity. This is going to be great in terms of how our diagrams are going to look like. How are we going to be able to do this? Like what it will be at the end, the configurations that are going to be required when we're working with this. So now what we will need to take into account is how to actually create this inheritance. So the first thing is that I'm going to have my client entity. This is my top level. This one is going to have the basic attributes that I just saw it, address, email, first name, last name, phone number, ones that apply for all of them. Then I create the children entities, in this case, individual, and in this case, corporation, pretty easy. And the inheritance configuration applies in this way. I select the entity that is one of the children entities. I go to the advanced properties, and I can go into the inheritance tab. And here we can define specifically which is the entity, the parent entity that we're having here. What happens when we do this configuration? That automatically this children entity will display for me the unique attributes that apply for them, but also all these attributes that you see that are like shadow are attributes that we are inheritance from the parent entity. And I am able to actually see this heritage diagram that allow me to see this entity, which is the parent entity where we're taking here. This is a great idea when you are creating your data models and when you actually want to create data models that are flexible, that are easy to manage, that are actually easy to change and to modify in the future. So my advice is always believe or always think about if you can create these schemas, and also take into account that it's not something that you can just have on two levels, right? In my example, I just show you parent and children, but you can have grandparent, grandparent, children, I don't know, little children. It doesn't matter. Like you can create these in as many levels as you want according to your needs. So second step, second tip of what you can do when we're working with this. Now, step number 3. In step number 3, we have everything about the creation of our forms. And as I was explaining you at the beginning, the creation of our form is nothing different than the place where we define how the UI is going to look like, right? So which information I'm going to display, which of those fields are going to be visible, which ones are read-only, which ones are mandatory, all the UI is defined here. That is, again, thinking about reduce and reuse, we need or we have to take into account if the forms that we're going to create are going to be one single form, or if actually what it will be maybe for me is going to be much better if I create reusable forms. So the option of creating reusable forms is quite good for us, because now what we're saying in this moment is that I am going to have the ability to go directly and create, right, one form, not specifically for one process and for one activity, but instead of that, reusable forms will belong mainly to the entities. And what is the great advantage of this? That if I am using one entity in 5, 7, 10 processes, then that reusable form is going to be available for me every single time. So here, as a quick example, we have this information. So imagine that here, I am going to just have this 3 different business situations. One, that it will be the purchase order. Another one, that is going to be the claims and complaints. And finally, one is going to be client information update. 3 different separate business situations with different objectives. But then when we analyze those data models, we can identify that even though they are different, they have different information and everything, all of them share one common entity that is going to be the client entity. So what happened? Instead of going into the purchase order or into the claims and complaint or into the client update information process and create individual forms there, it is better if I create one reusable form in the client entity, and from that client entity, then I am going to be able to reuse as many elements of this form when I want it. So I have one reusable form. The owner of that reusable form is the client entity, and then it doesn't matter where I use the client entity. Every single place that I use the client entity, this reusable form is going to be available, and for me, it will be just things of drag and drop, and that's it. So I reduce a lot my work, and I will enable the reusability of these reusable forms in different places. How this is looking like, or where I am going to be able to look like all this information here. So when I am creating my forms, let me just go here pretty quickly. So I am going to be in the step number 3, where we create all our forms. And from here, I am going to always be able to just open, right, of any of the forms that I create. When I create those forms, take into account that I am opening a form for a particular task within a process. So for this purchase request process, I want to create the form for the register purchase request activity. But when I open that, I don't want that is a form that I can maybe just use for that activity. Maybe I want to reuse this multiple times. So that's why I am able to identify. And something really important is when you are creating your forms, please pay attention always to this blue border, because are the blue borders the ones that allow me to know if I have reusable forms or not. So I here in this point, take a look that I am creating one form, but the way on how I am creating that form is reusing 1, 2, 3, and 4 reusable forms. How can you create reusable forms in your business situations? So every time that you are creating your forms, you are going to start always from the main point of your process. But now, as the reusable forms belongs to a particular entity, you can navigate through all the process that you have. So for example, in this example, I can say, hey, I want to go, let's have an example here. My purchase request, but I want to create a reusable form that displays the information of the requester. So I open the requester entity, I go down to the last part, and I am going to find the information of the reusable forms. If I want, I can just do right-click, click new form, and then I'm going to be in the place where I am creating the reusable form that I want to have. Now, once that you finish the creation of the reusable form, how can you use them? It's pretty easy. You identify which is the form that you want. Take a look at here. I have 4. And instead of creating everything from scratch, the only thing that you do is a drag and drop. So select, drag and drop, put it anywhere where you want in your form, add it, and then all the information will be automatically included. So this is really, really, really good when you are creating your projects. And I even give an advice here, and it's like, if you are not fully 100%, if the form that you are creating will be reused in a different scenario, but you have, I don't know, a feeling, you say like, maybe, I'm not sure, but maybe, it's better if you create it from a reusable point of view or not. It's better if you create it as a reusable form, because if later with the time you never reuse it, it's fine. But if later in the future you want to reuse it and you didn't define it as a reusable form at the beginning, you will need to create it again from scratch. So this is another really important point on how you can reuse to actually be more efficient. Okay? Now, what it will happen on our next step when we're working with this, right? So on the next step, we're going to just now move to the step number 4. And that step number 4 is going to be the place where basically we create all our business rules. So here is where we're going to have everything in terms of the logic, right? Validations, error messages, pre-population of information, everything in terms of the logic, everything that allows me to capture the logic of the process where I am working is going to happen here. And that's why in the business rules is really important to understand how we can enable reusability in this step. I will say that mainly, or in most cases, this is the step where we spend more time. Capturing the logic of a process is not an easy process, and because of that, it's going to always be good if I have options to accelerate this point. So for the expressions reusability is really, really important to understand this structure that we saw at the beginning, right? The structure of a project in Bizagi. So remember here, I have high level, or the highest level possible is the project. Then I have as many applications as I want, then different processes, and all these processes use different entities to create here. Why this is so important in terms of the expressions reusability? Mainly because you can create expressions at any of those levels. So if you create an expression at the process level, that is the first one and the basic one, it means that the expression that you create there at here can be reused only within that process. That's it. So if you create an expression at the beginning of the process to validate some information, you can reuse that information, that expression in the same process. That's it. But if you create an expression here in this process 1 and then you want to reuse it in process 2, it's not possible. Now, what happens if you want that situation? What happens if you want to reuse it not only in process 1 but also in process 2? Then you need to create an expression at the application level. Because when it is an expression at the application level, you can reuse it in process 1 and in process 2. But can I use it in process 3? No, because it's in a different application, so they don't share the common space. What happens if I want to use it even in process 3? Then it's better for you to define it in the project level, at the global. Because if you have an expression at the global level or at the project level, you can use it in any of the applications, any of the processes, and even in any of the entities that you have, okay? And the final level is going to be at the entity level. These entity expressions will allow you to reuse that logic every single day or every single point where you are using that entity, okay? So, what is the advice here? Always, before that you create an expression, ask yourself if what you are creating is unique for the process where you are working, or it is something that maybe you can reuse in a different place. So let me give you some examples. So if we're creating a vacation request process, right? And I need to create an expression in that vacation request process to validate the number of available days that one employee has. Probably that's unique for the vacation request process. So creating that at the process level can be a good idea, right? But what it will happen if I want to create an expression that allow me to, I don't know, validate if in all the HR processes that I have, I don't know, that something that gives me the date when an employee was hired, for example, right? So that's something that maybe I will not be using in just one single process, but in all the processes that I have in one application. So maybe it will be better to define it in the application level. Now, how are we going to know if we are creating an expression at one level or in a different one? So this is something that we need to take into account, or that we need to pay attention in terms of where are we creating our expressions. So usually what it happens is this. Let me just go back here. So in Bizagi, when you are in your projects and you are creating your expressions from the step number 4, most of the expressions that you create here are just at the process level. So I go into this step and I say that I want to create a new expression, and I create my new expression. This expression, mostly, it will be created at the level of the process. So if I want to create an expression at the application, at the project, or even at the entity, we need to go to the expert view. It is on the expert view where I am going to be able to see all those expressions. Exactly where? In the expert view, we have a menu that it is business rules. And here in the business rules is where I'm going to be able to see the expressions at the project level and at the application level. Take a look that in this example, I only have one application, this APP application. Here in this application, if I open my expressions, I am going to be able to see all the expressions that I have defined for this specific application. Now, if I go one level up here, everything that is out without any APP, here in the expression level, I am going to be able to see now all the expressions that I have at the project level, the highest level possible. If I want to see the ones that I have in the entities, so I can go to my entities, and within the entities, I can identify exactly which are the expressions that I create there. So take a look that every single entity has a section for expressions, and I can go and see if I have any expressions over there. And what I have to do if I want to see all the expressions that I have in my process, I can go to the processes, select the process where I am working, and then here, take a look that we have a section for my expressions, and I'm going to be able to see all of them. So now, when you have these different levels and you want to add a new expression into one of your processes, take a look, or now you need to pay attention, because it is going to be really important that you see exactly the expressions that you are creating in which level are located. So take a look that here, when I try to create a new expression, it is going to show me, all the expressions that I have here, are the ones at the global level. All the ones that I have here are going to be at the process level. So if I select one of these, I will reuse it in any other part of the process, and that's good. If I select one of the project, it's fine, and I'm going to be much more efficient here. So it's really, really important that now we understand this concept. There are going to be, of course, some considerations that we need to take into account when we're creating these expressions on the different levels, right? But if you understand this, it will be amazing. It's so good when we are able to reuse expressions in different levels, okay? Now, the next step, that is the number 4, I'm not going to spend too much time there because we follow almost the same logic as what we just saw with expressions. It means when I get here into the step number 5, and I define my performers, right? What I am going to do at the end is here, remember that the main objective is to define who is going to do every single task, right? So if I go into my first activity, there is going to be a simple condition that say, this activity must be executed by, I don't know, the case creator. And I can add as many conditions as I want and say that this must be, I don't know, from someone located in London or someone that has a director position, whatever I want. But for more advanced scenarios, right, in the creation of these performance rules, let me take a look to this one, for example, right? We are going to have the opportunity to, instead of simple, let's say, information, or instead of just creating simple elements, we have the option to create preconditions here. And when we create preconditions, this is nothing different that at the end created business rules, right? Expressions. So this is going to apply exactly in the same way as the expression that we had before. So here I am going to be able to see expressions that I have created at the level of the application, expressions that I have created at the level of the process, and I can decide if I want to create this assignation expression in one level or in the other one. So particularly for the step number 5, that is where we define our performance, you need to keep in your mind exactly the same conditions or the same considerations as when you are creating your expressions. Where you want to create it, if it's going to be at the process, if it's going to be at the project, and then reuse it according to that, okay? Now, finally, the last step where we are able to create, or where we can enable this reusability, is when we're talking about on the step number 6, that it is going to be basically the integration step. So what it is really important to consider at this level is what? When we are on the step number 6, mainly what we do is complete all the different integrations that I have for my project or that I need for my project. So it means that I can here set up my integrations with web services or with RPA providers or with connectors or with the SAP or with Excel, whatever is needed for my project. If this is going to be the step where I'm going to define them. So I define the integrations that my project needs. What it is really important in terms of reusability at this step is to understand that every single integration configuration in Bizagi has 2 main steps. The first one is to define what I'm going to call now the basic configuration of that integration, and the second one is the particular configuration of the integration according to the process where you are working. So every single time that you decide to use an integration, the first thing that you have to do is to set up the configuration details in the expert view through the different modules that we have there. It can be the external systems, or it can be the robots, or it can be native connectors. It can be anywhere, right? And once that you have that basic configuration there, then you can reuse that basic configuration in different places. It can be in a different process, in a different business situation, and there complete the configuration. So how this is going to look like in terms of reusability when we are actually in our Bizagi. So in our Bizagi, when we just go right here and we take a look to the integration, so take a look at the integrations, most of them happen basically in the expert view, and in the expert view, mainly the integration will happen either on the external system part here, or in the robot section, that is when we have anything about RPA. So if I have my integrations in terms of the external system, so it means connectors, web services, native connectors, SAP, Excel, form recognizer, any of those, I am going to complete the basic configuration here first. What's that basic configuration? Take a look that in this example, I have a web service that allow me to use the geolocation service from Google. So when I set up the configuration here, to be really honest, I am just setting the connection details. So which is going to be the URL, which is going to be the username, the password, or whatever is needed to connect to that system. It happened exactly the same when I have my connectors. So here I am using, for example, a DocuSign connector, and when I see the properties, I am just seeing the details that allow me to connect to that point, right? So this is going to be my connection details, the domain, the method, the authentication method, and everything that I got it here. So this is the first part. And this is a configuration that you will do just one time in your projects, because this configuration applies for the whole project. It's not just one for one process. It is not just one for application. It is for the whole project. But once that you have the basic configuration, then you need to move to the place where you are going to use the connector. And that happens usually in the wizard view where we add our connectors. So in this example, let's take a look for example over here. I am going to use that DocuSign connector here in this activity, and I have it here. Take a look, DocuSign envelope create. And this is where I'm going to complete the configuration, or the other part of the configuration of the connector. Here, I am not just saying these are the connection details, but here is where I'm going to say, from this connector, I want to use this action. And from these actions, I am going to do the mappings. And the mappings that applies here is for my specific process, right? So this is another really important thing, because the basic configuration that we do for connectors is something that we do just one time. And then, according to the process where we are working, we can just reuse it and complete it with the other information that we have there. So this is actually the way on how this reusability in connectors works when we are working in this step. Okay, So this is the last step that we got in our wizard to create our application, because of course the step numbers, like if we go to the last step, that is step number 7, this is the execution. And here, let's say we don't have anything to build or anything to reuse, right? So my message before that we finish and before we just go into the last couple of minutes, maybe for some QA, it's reduce and reuse. What I have just shown you are some of the options that are available when we are working in Bizagi and when we're building our projects. Are these the only ones? No. There are going to be other options. There are more options in the different steps that will allow you to reduce and to enable the reusability in your projects. So my final advice is just follow these tips, follow these advices that I just gave you. Think about always if what you are doing is something that is necessary to do it just one time, or it has the potential to be done multiple times. Because if there is something that has the potential to be done more than one time, then maybe the consideration that we need to take into account is not do it in the traditional way, but more following everything that is going to be the reusability approach. Okay? So really, really important, all this concept for you.